No one in that room expected the air to stop moving that night. It was one of those London galas where everything feels polished to the point of being untouchable. Chandeliers glowing, champagne glasses clinking softly, marble floors reflecting silhouettes of power and money. And standing at the center of it all was Victoria Beckham, controlled, composed, perfectly still. The woman who had spent decades mastering the art of silence. The woman people said could walk through chaos without a single crack in her voice. She was only meant to hand over an award. A neat moment, a graceful smile, then done. But halfway through her speech, something shifted. She paused, just long enough to make people look up. She rested her hand on the podium, leaned forward slightly, and her eyes locked onto someone in the crowd. A journalist. Her voice didn't tremble, it didn't rise, it hardened. And then she said it. 12 words that sliced through the room like glass. I kept quiet too long. People need to know what she did. No name, none was needed. Every single person in that room knew exactly who she meant. Meghan Markle. Before the lights even dimmed, an 11-second recording was already online. By morning, millions had watched it. Not shocked, stunned. Because for Victoria Beckham to break decades of silence, something serious had happened. Something deep. Something she had clearly carried far longer than anyone realized. And to understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to go back to when this wasn't a feud at all. When it looked like the beginning of something warm, something supportive, something almost protective. When Meghan first entered royal life, she didn't just marry into a family, she stepped into the most unforgiving spotlight on earth. New country, new rules, relentless press. And Victoria understood that better than almost anyone. She had survived it herself. She had learned how to move quietly, how to protect her private life, how to build an empire without bleeding in public. So she reached out, personally. Sources say Victoria gave Meghan her private contact list, stylists who could fix anything, PR experts who made problems disappear, discreet wellness specialists trusted only by the elite. These weren't names you could Google. These were doors that opened once, and only if someone trusted you. And Victoria didn't stop there. She sent clothing from her own fashion line directly to Kensington Palace. Private fittings, no publicity, no expectations, just support. At Wimbledon, the two women were seen laughing, leaning toward each other, whispering like friends who shared an unspoken understanding. Fashion insiders whispered too. Victoria didn't have to do any of this. She chose to. For a while, it looked perfect. Two women who understood pressure, two women who understood scrutiny, one helping the other survive a world that eats people alive. And then, quietly, something began to crack. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to feel wrong. By late 2019, Meghan began to feel exposed. Tiny details from her private life, things only a handful of people knew, started appearing in the press. Nothing explosive, but personal, too personal. Someone was talking, and behind closed doors, one name kept being whispered: Victoria. To most people, the idea sounded absurd. Victoria Beckham guarded her privacy like a fortress. She knew exactly what leaks could destroy. But suspicion doesn't need proof. It only needs fear. And once that fear took hold, Meghan didn't confront Victoria. She didn't ask questions, she simply disappeared. Messages stopped being answered, invitations slowed, then ended. The warmth vanished without explanation. And Victoria felt it before she understood it. One day, they were close. The next, the door was shut. No argument, no closure, just silence. By the time Meghan and Prince Harry stepped back from royal duties, the separation was complete. No joint appearances, no polite public gestures. The Beckhams were gone from the Sussex circle entirely. Victoria didn't complain, she didn't leak, she didn't defend herself. She did what she always did, she stayed quiet, focused on her family, her work, her life. And for a long time, people assumed that was the end of it. They were wrong. The moment that changed everything didn't happen in public. It happened quietly, through emails, through decisions made behind closed doors. Victoria had been preparing a children's hospital fundraiser, something she cared deeply about. Months of work, personal money, creative investment. And when Meghan agreed to co-host, it seemed perfect. Until weeks before the event, when Victoria's name suddenly vanished. According to insiders, Meghan told organizers that Victoria's brand didn't align with the royal vision. An email surfaced allegedly from Meghan's team requesting alternative fashion sponsorship due to brand alignment concerns. Just like that, Victoria was erased. Her contributions disappeared. Her planning was undone. No explanation, no conversation. For Victoria, this wasn't just professional humiliation, it was personal. It was the moment she realized the friendship she had protected had become something painfully one-sided, and she still didn't speak until that gala. And when she finally did, her husband stood beside her. The next morning, David Beckham posted a simple family photo. Smiles, warmth, togetherness. And beneath it, one line. Truth always comes out in the end. No names, no drama, just quiet loyalty, support poured in. Designers, models, industry insiders. Meanwhile, Meghan's usual defenders, Oprah Winfrey, Serena Williams, were silent. Harry said nothing. And then came the audio, 14 seconds. A calm voice saying, "She's lucky I don't say what I know about her." The uploader claimed it was Meghan speaking about Victoria. The internet exploded. Millions of views in hours. Even Meghan's most loyal supporters hesitated. Victoria didn't respond. A source close to her offered 5 words instead. She was disappointed but not surprised. And suddenly, everything made sense. Whispers spread that Victoria was considering something she had never done before. A full interview. Not hints. Not silence. Her truth. And before she even confirmed it, Meghan's PR team reportedly went into crisis mode. The power had shifted. When asked why she finally spoke, Victoria didn't attack. She didn't accuse. She said quietly that she believed silence protected people, but all it really did was protect the wrong person. And those words echoed louder than any accusation ever could. Because when someone like Victoria Beckham breaks her silence, it's never impulsive. It's never accidental. And if what she hinted at is only part of the truth, then this story isn't over. It's just finally being told. And that was the moment the silence stopped feeling safe for everyone involved. Because once Victoria let even a crack of truth escape, people started looking back at the past with different eyes. Old moments, old interviews, old expressions that once seemed harmless now felt loaded. Every time Meghan had spoken about betrayal, about being mistreated, about people on the inside, listeners started wondering who she really meant. And every time Victoria had stayed quiet, calm, almost painfully composed, that silence suddenly looked less like indifference and more like restraint. Insiders say Victoria didn't sleep much after the gala, not because she regretted what she said, but because she knew what it would unleash. When you've spent a lifetime controlling narratives, choosing silence carefully, you understand exactly what happens when you finally speak. You don't get to control how far it travels. And this time, she didn't want to stop it. People close to Victoria say she went back through years of messages, emails, quiet favors she never talked about, moments where she defended Meghan privately while staying neutral publicly, moments where she absorbed the discomfort so others wouldn't have to. And as she looked at it all laid out, one feeling kept returning, heavier each time. She hadn't been protecting peace. She had been protecting someone who never intended to return the favor. Meanwhile, Meghan's camp was unraveling in real time. The silence from her inner circle wasn't strategic anymore. It was nervous. Reporters started noticing how carefully worded statements suddenly became delayed, how sources that once spoke confidently now hedged, how close friends suddenly stopped returning calls. Because the problem wasn't the gala comment alone. The problem was that Victoria Beckham had credibility Meghan couldn't attack. Victoria wasn't loud, she wasn't reckless, she wasn't known for drama, and that made her dangerous. Fashion insiders began quietly confirming what had never been said out loud, that Victoria had felt pushed aside more than once, that there were events she stepped back from gracefully when in reality she had been edged out, that she had been advised repeatedly to stay quiet because it wasn't worth it. And for years she listened. But something had changed. People noticed it in small ways first. Victoria stopped avoiding the topic altogether. Not openly, not directly, but she stopped redirecting conversations. She stopped smiling politely when Meghan's name came up. She stopped playing the role of the woman who absorbs discomfort to keep keep rooms comfortable. And then came the question everyone was afraid to ask her. A reporter late one evening asked if she regretted ever reaching out in the beginning. Victoria paused, not for effect, for honesty. And she said something that sent a quiet shock through everyone listening. She said she didn't regret kindness. She regretted confusing kindness with loyalty. That single line changed the temperature of the entire story because it reframed everything. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't rivalry. This wasn't fashion versus royalty. This was about boundaries crossed quietly and repeatedly until someone finally refused to absorb it anymore. Behind the scenes, people say Meghan felt cornered for the first time. Not because of public opinion alone, but because the usual strategy wasn't working. There was no obvious attack to counter, no explosive accusation to disprove. Just a woman who had stayed quiet too long and finally stopped doing it. The rumored long-form interview still hasn't aired. Some say it's recorded, others say Victoria hasn't decided whether to release it at all. And that uncertainty is what's driving everyone crazy. Because the most powerful part of this story isn't what's been said, it's what hasn't. Every hour that passes without Victoria adding another word makes people believe there's more she's choosing not to reveal. More moments, more decisions, more quiet betrayals that didn't make headlines but changed relationships permanently. And Meghan knows it. Sources close to the situation say Meghan's greatest fear isn't exposure, it's comparison, because the contrast has become impossible to ignore. One woman stayed quiet for years, built quietly, supported privately, and spoke once when she could no longer stay silent. The other spoke often, publicly, emotionally, and now finds herself surrounded by silence that isn't chosen. In the end, this story was never really about fashion or royalty, it was about power. The kind that shouts, and the kind that waits. Victoria Beckham waited, and when she finally spoke, she didn't accuse, she didn't beg to be believed, she didn't need to. She simply stopped protecting the wrong person. And that decision, more than any headline, more than any leaked audio, is what changed everything. Because when a woman who has mastered silence decides she's done with it, she doesn't need to say much at all. She just needs to speak once. And the world listens. The world listens. The world listens. The world